The Security Weekly News is live on Tuesdays and Fridays at 12 o'clock Eastern Time most every week. I try to scan and produce a quick look at some major stories to help you keep up with what's going on in and around the industry in a short format. Myself, Jason Wood, and other guest commentators provide greater insight every week. I'm Doug White, and I hope that you will look for the Security Weekly News in all of your favorite podcast catchers and subscribe for the latest content.
Security Weekly. Love Dr. Doug's hair there. That's great hair.
Mm-hmm.
And now for the Enterprise Security Weekly News, we do have Mr. Tyler Shields joining us. Hello, Tyler.
What up, what up? Let's take a moment here and talk about your awesome hair, too. I love your hair because I'm insanely jealous of it.
Thank you.
For those that can't see, he was giving me flirty eyes.
Next week on Enterprise Security Weekly, Adrian talks about his favorite hair products.
Yes, sir. I could use them too.
I don't really have any. Yeah, I will just do. And that just infuriates people even more when I tell them that. I'm just like, yeah, whatever's in the hotel, that's what I use.
No,
go to hell.
Hotel shampoo.
Yeah, it's just good genes is kind of the secret, right? Like, I'm sorry, but I don't have to do a whole lot to it. All right, here. Let's see. So the first one, I was a little confused when I saw this pop up. Vulcan Cyber closes $55 million Series B with additional $34 million to solidify position as leader in cyber risk management. So I remember Vulcan Cyber as competing in the same space as Kenna Security, which was acquired by Cisco a while ago, 2018, 2019. Like, it's been a while.
Yep.
And they kind of pivoted a bit, like they were trying to automate patching, and they would auto-generate scripts that would patch things for you. You know, I wasn't aware that this was something that people needed. And I've used the product. I've actually spent some time in the product, good product, really focused on vulnerability management prioritization, which I can see calling that cyber risk management. But what I don't get are the funding rounds here. Do you have any theory on what might have happened here, Tyler? Because they had a Series B, which this is what they're referencing, back in 2021, March of 2021. And now they're saying they're just now closing that Series B with another $34 million today.
Yeah, that's interesting, Adrian. Is it a Series B extension, maybe? Meaning it's literally at the exact same prices and valuations as the previous round, and thus they're calling it a Series B extension?
But they
because they do make note in the release that the recent round of funding justifies the previous unicorn valuation. So it's a little confusing. The language is a little confusing.
They are in a Forrester Wave, though.
They are. And as far as I know, they're a good company.
Yeah.
But the language
so
is
that's
confusing.
It's exactly what it is, Adrian. So on March 17th, 2021, according to Crunchbase, they took in $21 million, led by Dawn Capital as a Series B. And now they've taken an additional $34 million in a Series B extension, which is basically saying we are now, quote, closing the Series B, which means it was closed before. They took the money in, and then they reopened it with the same term, same round, and said, hey, we're going to extend the Series B. It just happens to be 2 years later. So this is just a flat round is what it looks like to me.
Gotcha. It's interesting, the categories they say they're in, ASM, for one, application security posture management, risk-based vulnerability management, which is the one I'm familiar with. That's the prior, we pull in all your Qualys, Tenable, Rapid7 and make sense of it and prioritize it for you. And then exposure and risk analytics. The CASM piece and the application security posture management piece, I am less familiar with. I'm not even sure. I haven't dived into application security posture management yet. I'm not even sure what that means.
So I can give you a tip. I can give you information on both. Chasm is an area that both Katie and I are intimately familiar with.
Yep.
Her current employer, my former employer, are Chasm vendors.
Yeah.
I don't know. I presume your current employer actually positions that way still. Katie, I haven't been in my previous employer for almost a year now, but that's about collecting information about all the assets in your entire digital assets, cyber assets in your environment. In which case it might make sense to enrich vulnerabilities and have vulnerabilities connected to your asset information, right? So I think it's a natural 1-2 punch to connect our BVM and Chasm markets, which many Chasm vendors are starting to do, including where some of the smaller ones, Nucleus, and some of the up and coming vulnerability management style vendors are starting to say, hey, we just collect information about your entire universe, and then we overlay the vulnerability data to enrich those assets. To complete the story, before I pass it back to you, Adrian, is the ASPM space, which is Application Security Posture Management. That is essentially taking a look at all of your applications, and again, by collecting all the asset information, allowing you to connect what typically is today in a modern application disparate assets, right? You might have a data store here, a function as a service over there, allows you to connect those logically into applications and then look for the configuration state of that entire universe of assets and configure and kind of do what Wiz does for cloud, ASPM will do for your application configuration states. ASPM is super young. I don't think it necessarily sticks around as an isolated market long. I think it gets absorbed into something else pretty quickly, but that's kind of the history of both those markets.
And those are your own internally developed applications?
Yes. Yep. Not SaaS.
Okay. Makes sense. Okay. So that's how you
Katie, anything you want to add there? Katie, since you play in these spaces?
No. I think the problem more than anything with these terms is, well, let's just go back to zero trust. They're getting mushy. They're getting messy because Chasm started as a thing, and then the Chasm vendors, my company included, started adding to what that meant because there needs to be an evolution of a product. There's nothing wrong with that. You need to evolve a product. It can't just do one little thing, because as you beta test it, and then as you get real customers, and then as those real customers ask for more use cases, you have to build out that product. And as that product, more features, more functionality is built into it, it starts touching other spaces. And as it starts touching other spaces, people look for ways to describe it. And the ways they look to describe it, if there's a category and they can use that and sort of mold it, they will. And this is the problem. And I actually just wrote an article on why this is super problematic, mostly for buyers. But it happens in almost every space, right? Because if you start this small, you're talking about a feature. And companies, if you're a good company, you don't want to build a feature. You want to build a product, and then you want to build a platform, maybe in quotes or not. But it happens, and then people need a way to describe it. And so instead of creating a new category, sometimes they just get all of these different words together, and then nobody really understands it. So it's trying to solve a problem, but what it actually ends up doing is making it a little more confusing for everybody.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's tough to do with a category that's changing rapidly. Trying to define it and give it a term, like the acronym or term has to kind of evolve with it, because it's not going to stand still. All right, I'm going to run through these others real quick here, and we can go back to any that are interesting. But the number 2 there, the 6.4 million seed funding is for TestifySec, which I'm trying to remember what they do. Software supply chain security platform, and then Mirror Securities, also software supply chain security platform, and then Risk Ledger, third-party supply chain security platform. So we have a bit of a theme here today.
Yeah, and the kicker is when you're talking about third-party software supply chain, It's very ill-defined. Really, what does it mean? Like, software composition analysis was the core of software security supply chain technologies, but what are you doing beyond that? And I still am not convinced that software security supply chain or software supply chain security is anything. Is there's just no meat on that bone for me yet. I'm still trying to wait for a good definition of what that really means.
Yeah. And then there's Tidal Cyber is in here. It's described as threat-informed defense. And it's interesting now, there was a report we talked about last week. It was a Scientia report that talked about how little of the MITRE ATT&CK framework ever actually shows up in attacks. And so now when I see somebody's press release talking about how they embed MITRE ATT&CK, it sounds a lot less impressive to me now that I know that it's basically like a top 10, top 15, and the rest of it's just you're wasting time if you're running after it. I mean, it's good that it stands out.
You know what stands out to me about these funding rounds this week? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them, 8 of them.
All small, all seed?
Is that there's 8 of them. That's what stands out to me this week. I'm pleasantly surprised with the number of funding rounds announced this
late
week.
In the year?
Yeah. Well, this late in the year, but simultaneously, I'm getting 3 or 4 this week of, we're a pre-seed or seed round $5 million raised company that's dead or dying or laying off 3/4 of our staff. So I'm seeing the flip side of this from an investor angle, in that I'm seeing companies hitting that toilet bowl with the frequency that's way too high. It's certainly getting me quite worried. And simultaneously, I'm seeing a new record number of seed level investments. So, it's interesting. I don't know if the ones that took in that seed round of 5-6 million 18 months ago or 6 months ago or 12 months ago or whatever it is, timeline wise, are just up against it now and haven't done enough traction in the down market. But simultaneously, investors are going, well, I'm not going to put it there. They didn't grow fast enough, but I still got to put it to work. So I'm going to go one step earlier and start and just place a new bet and see if I can catch the next wave. It's almost like, surfers that paddled out in the ocean. They started to paddle on a wave and went, nah, that one's not going to materialize. And then they went back and they're hitting the second wave that's right behind it.
But I mean, that's where from an investor standpoint, that's where you want to fail, right? Like you're talking about companies that are 5 million funding and under going under, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. 5 to 20. The interesting thing is it depends on the investor, right? If you're sitting on billions, you can't even touch a $5 million investment. It's just too dang small, right? But if you're sitting on 200 million, 300 million, you're doing $5 million checks, $3 million checks, that could be perfect. And then you got the micro investors that are raising 20, 30 million and writing $500,000 checks that are just getting decimated because they're not, these small companies are not getting picked up for the A rounds.
Yeah.
So it just depends on who you're talking to.
Yeah. So sounds like potentially companies we haven't even discovered yet or talked about yet, are going away, which goes to your point you've made, I think, throughout last year and this year that, my perspective was that security companies don't die as often as companies in other startups in other fields, but your point's always been, maybe you're just not seeing it.
I think they die just as much. Yeah, I think they die just as much, but I think many times they die silently in the woods alone. And you never come across the carcass.
There's a, if a tree falls joke there somewhere.
There is,
I'm not
for sure.
I'm too far into this podcast to find it.
And it's sad, right? I mean, when you're really thinking about it, there's 5, 10, 15, 20 people sometimes at these companies that, they're just like, yep, and we're done. Tomorrow we're folding up shop. See you later. And, I'm in a cyber marketers Slack. It's pretty much all the big cyber marketers that you can imagine. And, it seems to be every week there's 2, 3, 4 rounds of layoffs at small to mid-sized cyber startups right now. More layoffs coming. And then occasionally you even hear of the death of the company, right? So I think we're in a tough spot right now for a lot. And I am that's what makes me surprised by 8 funding rounds this week is like, wow, okay, maybe we're bouncing off the bottom of the barrel. Maybe, hoping, fingers crossed.
Yeah, so talking about trends of ones that we might see dying off in a similar way a year from now. HydroX AI and Protecto are both companies built around securing the use of AI, specifically LLMs. And Protecto's India-based. HydroX AI is US-based. Not sure how I feel about that brand. That's going to make it tough to pivot without changing your name. But a couple seed rounds there, and then the last one I think I had here, Cavelo, is a Canadian-based company that also says they're doing Chasm. So that was an interesting one. It seems kind of late to market to be just now raising seed and doing Chasm.
Yeah, definitely a little bit late to market, right, Katie?
We just heard them come up recently. It's not super surprising, right? You've got a space that's getting a lot of attention. They're going to be chasing a lot of companies, including a lot of companies who didn't start in Chasm, who are now vying for Chasm because it's a legit space. But hey,
I would hope they're using the benefit of hindsight to maybe cover some spots that weren't clear to the folks who were early on this market. Yeah, I mean that's basically your big advantage being late to market, is knowing stuff the other guys didn't.
Right.
And hoping they're sinking money into stuff that doesn't have value to customers, and you can avoid that mistake.
I had somebody comment to me specifically about this company. Well, they're only seed rounds, so they're not viable. And I'm like, oh, it's a lot easier to build when somebody's already spelled out the roadmap for you. So I certainly don't want to be like, oh, no chance, buddy. But they're chasing a market for sure.
Yeah.
I'll roll the dice. Having been out of the market for almost a year, I'm going to say no chance, buddy. And the reason it's no chance isn't because they're too late to the game. Well, it is because they're too late to the game, but not because the current leaders in the current definition of the market are going to win. But I think this market folds into something else eventually, right? Folds into vuln management, folds into one of those players, thus eliminating the existence of this market potentially before these guys get to takeoff velocity.
Well, there is that, yeah. I'll probably be fired for saying this, but I don't see in 5 years the Chasm market as a standalone. I don't. Please don't fire me. I like my job. I like the people I work for. Please.
If they get to the point where they can start doing some acquisitions, I mean, it's a great platform to build on, to start pulling other stuff in, right?
Look,
because that's literally
market.
The whole product
market,
is designed around integrating other things, right? You'd think it would acquire companies well.
So the Chasm market is interesting, and I can talk about it. I'm gonna steal this up from underneath Katie because I don't want her to get in trouble with her employer. But I can talk about it publicly because I've been out of the space for a year. The Chasm market is interesting in the sense that it gives visibility into a lot of stuff, but in isolation, Chasm doesn't protect anything. Right? It gives you visibility, observability, change management, and a lot of other value props that are not necessarily protection value props, and not directly necessarily, although it can be used this way, vulnerability discovery value props, although it can do some of that. And so what ends up happening is it becomes a central hub, which could be extremely valuable for other systems and allowing you to programmatically do queries against the environment and find things that you don't know about. But in an era of down market, in an era of, hey, I need less tools, not more, in an era of not wanting to spend in down public markets, this isn't the first thing you buy. Chasm's not the first thing you buy. And so it's a more difficult market to continue to grow right now, as much as I would love to see all the players in this market succeed because I love the space. I think it's brilliant.
It's what I'm hearing.
It's not a mandatory buy. That's correct.
Yeah. Yeah, and RunZero is also firmly in this market as well now. They started out with their own proprietary scanner that was really good and just immediately started adding all these integrations and stuff because they'd already built the database, the home for it, right? So why not start pulling in other data? And they're aggressively, I think, catching up with JupyterOne and Exonius.
And I think the reason why this market doesn't exist is it'll get folded into Qualys, Rapid7, Tenable could all buy the space if they haven't already built it themselves. Although many of them may have even built it themselves, they could buy in the space. If you think about the future of security in general, it's large-scale data collection with AI overlays. That's what this market does by default. Axonius, Jupiter One, they have massive, massive data sets on their customers, which gives them huge potential. So from an acquisition standpoint, Palo Alto, Cisco, I could go on and on. Microsoft could all make plays to acquire into this space and use this as a central repository of cybersecurity events and management, et cetera, giving them a great platform to build on top of. Anyways, there's a lot of different potential exit opportunities for this space. I would love to see consolidation happen in the next 2 to 3 years here.
Yeah, for sure. So acquisitions, we've got 2 that I thought were interesting. The first is Krebs Stamos Group LLC got acquired by SentinelOne. They're calling it Pinnacle One. They're creating basically an advisory group of just these 2 guys within their services component, which is interesting.
They had a small team, I believe. They had a small team of actual consultants. I'm not sure how big it was. But it's an acqui-hire.
It's not just the 2 of them? Okay.
No, it's not just the 2 of them. That's just the brand. They had a small team there, and it's essentially an acqui-hire of an amazing brand. The history, I don't know Chris Krebs that well. I'm actually friends with Alex Stamos. He and I worked together 20 years ago, and he's had a very storied career, having been CISO of Facebook, CISO of Yahoo, CISO of a bunch of different places. He's been around the block and knows what he's doing. Started his own consulting company. He's also was or currently is, don't hold me to this, I think was a adjunct professor at Stanford. He's a very, very smart guy. And this was just an acqui-hire of expertise into, expertise and brand, right? They come with that brand too. So it's a brand and expertise acqui-hire to stand up within the buying companies to stand up a services component.
He's also sometimes guest co-host on Risky Business, but we are not cool
is
enough
he really?
to have Alex Stamos as a guest co-host.
Yeah, wasn't he the one that did that spicy pepper challenge recently? And Wasabi was the hottest thing that he could tolerate.
No, that was Caleb Simon.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Caleb Simon. Yep.
Different OG. Definitely as smart, brilliant guy as well, but a different, very big brand name CISO did that one.
It's funny. I forgot about that. All right, the other acquisition here is a product I haven't thought about since I needed a Perl runtime on a Windows machine, ActiveState. I think the only reason I know who ActiveState is if you needed to run Perl on Windows, and we're talking 20 years ago in my career, you would go download ActiveState Perl runtime and made it super easy to get Perl on your system. But yeah, they got acquired by a PE firm, it looks like. And they're calling it a secure open source integration platform company now. Hey,
Adrian, only boomers use Perl. Everybody else uses not even Python anymore.
No, Python's still pretty actively used. In fact, we just talked about some new Python malware earlier. There's now an info
I get ripped on for writing code in Python, let alone Perl.
Really?
Perl is for the OG graybeards.
What are you supposed to be writing in? Go, Rust? Are those the cool ones?
I don't know. Let's ask all the kids in Discord. What's the hot new language that everybody actually writes their scripts in?
I hope it's Python. Are compiled languages, aren't they? I don't know.
Hey, at least I'm still semi-relevant if it's Python. So let's make sure it's Python, guys. I'm pro Python.
All right.
I think everybody's pro Python right now, but
Microsoft announced something that was already pretty well known, that they were bringing in generative AI powered security tools. Kind of goes to your point, Tyler, of taking these big data lakes. It seems like that's the goal of, they're calling it Security Copilot. And actually, our company is the only SaaS security company that's partnering with them at launch on this, and it's still like a private launch. They're not quite ready for a public general availability yet. But yeah, a lot of potential promise here.
Yeah, Microsoft's going to be a big player in the. I don't know what it's going to be called. I keep calling it the one ring to rule them approach to cyber. I think they stand to be one of the bigger players that could compete there. Palo can compete there, as I've mentioned before, with their numerous sets of data. The easy way to understand who's going to win in this space is not their AI capabilities, because everybody will advance their AI capabilities in a relatively similar time frame. What really matters is what data you have. Who's got the most data?
Right.
Who's got the richest and broadest and deepest data set that you can ask questions of? I was at the Forrester Security and Risk Summit this week, and I saw a keynote by George Colony, the founder of Forrester. He's been around as an analyst since the birth of analysts, right? He covered, I think, the release of like Windows 95 or something as an analyst, right? That's how long he's been an analyst. And during his keynote, he said, really, what does the future look like? It's compiling massive sets of data and using English language questions to ask any question of the data set and getting back accurate answers. That's AI fundamentally. So what do you need to be successful there? The biggest pile of data to be able to ask the questions of. The routines of how to ask the questions will evolve continuously. But whoever who owns the data owns the oil.
And it's interesting because one of the trends we're seeing is instead of pulling all your data and putting it into one place, we're seeing more and more tools that can pull that data just in time that actually link to that data. So you don't have to incur the costs of moving it around every single time there's like a better data lake or something like that.
Yeah. The problem with that, though, is that I'm not sure the current AI algorithms work well with data sets that are JIT, that are just-in-time data sets, because the algorithms aren't designed that way. Because if you're doing just-in-time, you don't have global broad asset like a brain might over a set of data. You have to pull in pieces as necessary.
Yeah.
And this is where my AI depth will depart, and where I would go to like a Daniel Miesler and say, hey, buddy, does this just-in-time approach actually work? If it does, I agree with you 100%. If it doesn't, then you're going to have to, whoever owns the data wins the war.
So maybe it's that the training happens before the just-in-time question asking process. So maybe those are two separate processes. But again, definitely not an expert in this area also. So I'd have to go ask around.
Yeah, but I think you're making my point, Adrian, in the sense that what you just talked about is the ML or AI algorithm itself and how it works. That's going to be equivalent. Like Microsoft figures it out, or OpenAI figures it out, or Google figures it out. Within a very short time frame, the others will be using the same approaches and techniques. So again, who wins? Whoever already has the data, either programmatically, already stored in a data lake, just in time. Whoever can get at the data will win this war.
Yeah. Well, I think there's three separate pieces here, right? There's the general purpose AI, LLM, right? That's trained on very broad data. It knows how to put together a report. It knows different formats. It knows how to do useful things. And then there's the proprietary data, the data that's proprietary to you, which isn't trained into the LLM, but is used as like a data set that you can now ask this LLM questions on, right? So I don't think you train on it the same way the LLM trains on everything else. But again, I don't know exactly how that works. And then the third part is actually asking the questions, the process of getting answers.
I highly recommend actually reading the Microsoft link on their security blog that we have linked in our show notes, because it talks about how they're rolling it out. Microsoft Defender for Cloud, Microsoft Defender for External Attack Surface Management, custom plugins, Microsoft Intune with AI, Microsoft Entra with AI, Microsoft Purview with AI, right? Like all of those components and how they're actually going to use AI to make each of them better. It's a really good read.
You imagine the workforce you have to tackle all that crap at the same time? It's incredible. It's a lot.
Well, it's Microsoft. They've got it.
Right. Yeah. $20 billion security vendor.
That's right.
All right. Let's move on here. So that's number 12 is the link Tyler was talking about in our show notes. So look for story number 12. Number 13, Semgrep. Not a whole lot to talk about here, but they now have their own secret scanner So this has become kind of like a mini attack surface management market, finding secrets where they shouldn't be, or they could be scraped by attackers and things like that. Speaking of Daniel Miessler, number 14 is an essay by him, and he's arguing that AGI doesn't have to be a single product from a single company, but that the first time we see it, it will be kind of a combination of, maybe multiple LLMs or something like that. Something that's stitched together from multiple different sources. So interesting read there. I got a couple links here. Just New York State is going nuts with its cybersecurity strategy. Just released new requirements for financial services companies. And then even more recently, just announced, and we won't get to see the regulations until December 6th, I think, and there's going to be an open comments period. But they're adding new cybersecurity regulations for hospitals throughout New York State, which does not surprise me, because every morning I look at an RSS feed of all the breaches going on, and hospitals are on that list every week. There's new hospital systems that are getting disruptive. They're having to move patients around. It's crazy how often hospitals and healthcare organizations are getting hit with ransomware and other attacks.
Man, these ransomware scenarios are just getting so bad, and we'll talk about a really unique, innovative tactic when we get to the last stories of the day. But man, they're doing everything to squeeze money out of these companies and these hospitals and these institutions. It's so sad.
Yeah, I mean, once they became businesses, they started acting aggressively like, capitalist business does, right? So now they're doing, they're learning the same tricks from actual businesses and doing some nasty, shady stuff.
Yep.
So before we get to that story, two more to mention here. The Mirai Confessions is is this Andy Greenberg?
That's Andy Greenberg's piece, and it is phenomenal. Andy, for those of you that don't know, Andy Greenberg's a writer for Wired. He also has written for every major high tech. Like, he's one of the best. Yeah, he's one of the best cyber journalists ever, in my opinion. Probably the best. And his writing is riveting. I'm about halfway through reading that article myself right now. It's like reading a wonderful book. But for me, what I really dug about that
one day.
What I really loved about that article so far, halfway through, is the psychological components of these teenagers who figured out how to literally take down the internet. Anytime they wanted, they could break the internet. The descent from very, very brilliant, children, teens, young teens, middle schoolers, the descent down the path of what resulted in, some very dangerous things happening to them. So it's a great read, and I highly recommend you take a look at it.
Yeah, and the TLDR of Mirai back in 2015, 2016, basically these young hackers figured out that there's all these IoT devices on the internet. They all have bandwidth, and they all have default credentials, and they just wrote scripts and automated scooping them up and turning them into a botnet, and wrote malware to actually run on all these Linux-based IoT devices. And it was really incredible. Like, they cross-compiled that malware for every chipset you can imagine, for x86, for PowerPC, for MIPS, for ARM, for several different kinds of ARM. It was crazy. And lots of surveillance cameras scooped up. People's broadband modems got scooped up.
Yep. Self-taught teens is
and so this is a story.
It's insane how smart these kids were.
Yeah. And so this is a story of how and why, I guess. I have not dug into it yet, but the fact that you're enjoying it, Tyler, I'll tackle this probably later today.
Yeah, well, they started by dropping Minecraft servers off and messing with each other's video games. That's where their descent into DDoS madness began. So we'll let you read the rest of the story from there.
Yeah. And so our squirrel story today, our specific ransomware group, what was the name of it? ALF-V, or Black Cat ransomware group, filed an SEC complaint that one of their targets that they hacked didn't report the hack as required by SEC rules. So they got snitched on.
Except it's not required for a few more days.
Oh, for a few more days?
Yeah. They made a mistake. They were good in theory. They thought it was like 4 days or something that it had to be reported, and the regulation didn't go into effect for 90 days from the announcement of the regulation, which hasn't quite hit yet. So technically, it's not actually required.
That doesn't make it any less hilarious in my mind.
No, it makes it even more hilarious.
Good in theory, poor in execution, Adrian. That's all.
So a lot of these guys get caught, but I find it interesting, the trend that attackers are more and more willing to speak to journalists and to like talk publicly. You know, like journalists just go ask them, how'd you hack into, what was the casino MGM? And they just gave them details. I don't know how much we can trust those details, but sometimes they make stuff up. They put together old data leaks and claim that they've created a new breach or something like that. That happens all the time. But yeah, it's a weird trend. It's like PR as an attack tool, right?
I mean, I've been in groups over the last 20 years, obviously mostly 20 years ago now, not more recently, but I've been involved with groups that actually had dedicated PR people to the hacking groups. We had people that knew how to do that, and their full-time job was to handle how we represent that group publicly and how the public sees that hacking group, whether it be, better blog posts, stronger blog posts, more thought leadership content, just like any other marketing org, or going to press contacts like Andy Greenberg and pitching a story to them. Look, I can tell you exactly how this went down if you cover it in this way. There was a lot of that over the years back in the Loft and the Cult of the Dead Cow. They had PR dedicated people that worked the angles that way.
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy. All right. Well, that's all I've got for today. Thanks so much, Katie and Tyler, for joining me today.
Great to see you. Thank you, Adrian.
Been a fun episode. And a big thanks to everyone for watching or listening to this week's episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. Next week is Thanksgiving, so we will be running an older one. And we'll see you the week after that.